Hello everybody and welcome back to another video. Today we are taking a look at the 2023 roster for the Guangzhou Charge, or at least we are going to speculate on what the roster for the 2023 Guangzhou Charge is. This team has not made any official announcements as to who the players on this roster are as of me recording this video. I'm recording a couple days earlier than I normally would, but generally speaking, this team has not made any official announcements. However, there is a lot of stuff that leads me to believe that the majority of this roster is the same as it was last season. I don't think they're really going to have much of a different roster from what we saw from them in the second half of the year last year, which really is not a surprise when you consider kind of the overall scope of how they performed last season. Despite the fact that they started the season 1-11, they finished the season 9-15, going 8-4 in the second half of the year, making it to the the Summer Showdown, and then also, of course, make it into the play-ins where they lost in a reverse sweep to the Chengdu Hunters. But they were very, very close to being kind of playing for that final playoff spot against the Hangzhou Spark, but unfortunately they did fall short. But I do think that the majority of their roster performed incredibly well last year. They did officially confirm that Krong retired and that Aprita was released back in December. Since then, there have been no announcements from this team in terms of kind of who they have and who they don't have. So I think the safe assumption is that they are returning the majority of their roster from last year. Pretty much the entirety of their roster from last year, in all honesty, I think is the kind of returning pieces for this team. So let's take a look at this Guangzhou Charge roster. As you can see it here on your screen, Choi Se-won, Farway 1987, Xerneas, Jimmy, and Piggy are the players who currently Wikipedia has as the members of this roster. Like I said, nothing officially confirmed, but they did confirm that a number of players did leave, these being the 5 that have not. There's been some pictures on Twitter. They've had Jimmy posing in the new jerseys. There's a picture from Piggy's Twitter where both he and Choi Se-won have the new jerseys on. So leads me to believe that this roster is returning the majority of their pieces. They don't have a 6th player yet because they haven't announced anything yet, so I don't know who it is, but I'll talk a bit about kind of what I would like to see from them as we get further into this video. Let's jump in and let's talk about this roster. Let's start with the support duo of Farway and Xerneas, because I think they were really, really good last year. Obviously, Xerneas began his Overwatch League career as Yveltal with the Chengdu Hunters for several years before joining this Charge roster as Xerneas in the middle of last season. My Pokemon heart grew a million sizes that day. And I think that these two are really, really solid. Obviously, they played together on Chengdu back in 2021. And then, that whole playoff thing happened with Yveltal, and he didn't come back for the 2022 season. Farway joined this Charge team kind of the beginning of the year, but I think they really hit a stride when the two of them were together. I think Xerneas is a really talented support player. I kind of mentioned it in the Hangzhou Spark video. I like Lengsa. I don't think he's the best Chinese main support. I think Xerneas is. I think Xerneas is really, really talented. I think every time we've seen him play, he looks really good. So I think he is a really solid playmaker as well, which I think is his real big plus as a main support player. And I thought Farway was good as well for this team last season. I was not as high on Farway in 2021 as I was on Monk on the Chengdu Hunters. But last year, I do think Farway was a very good piece for this team, and I think he was, generally speaking, one of the parts that I think elevated this team the most when it came to kind of their late season run. I think the two of them really were a really solid duo. I think they did a lot to kind of keep this team competitive. 8-4 was a really good record for the second half of the year. That was the only teams with better records were Shanghai, the Seoul Dynasty, and the Dallas Fuel. That was a similar record, the same record to teams like the Shock and the Gladiators and the Outlaws. So 8-4 was a very good run in that second half of the year. When you look at kind of around APAC right now, this support duo honestly might be the best in the region. It's among the best. I feel pretty good about Monk and Langsa, and I feel pretty good about the Dallas Fuel support line with MCD and Bliss, but I do think the Faraway and Xerneas is among the best support lines in the region, possibly the best. I think that they have a very solid core there to kind of build around. I think Xerneas is flexible enough that you get a lot out of him. Obviously, Mercy is kind of the hero that he's most known for, but he's also very good on Lucio. His Brig's pretty good as well. Faraway, really known for his Zenyatta. It's incredible. But we've also seen him play play Ana, play Moira. We didn't really get to see Kiriko out of him, so tough to kind of judge where he is there. But all in all, I do think this is a really solid support duo. I think it's the best part of this roster, and it's the part that I am most excited about going into the 2023 season. Let's talk now about the damage line. They have Choi Zaewon and they have Jimmy. I think Choi Zaewon is pretty solid. He was kind of the best piece for this team for a couple of years when he joined this team back in 2020, for the 2021 season, he joined this team. And he was pretty good. That was not a very good look for the Charge, but Choi Zaewon was pretty consistent. Really good flex DPS player. We saw a lot of performance out of him, especially in his Tracer, but even like his Genji, his Echo. Those are good heroes for him. Pharah, stuff like that. Pretty exciting stuff out of him. You pair him with Jimmy, who, honestly, when he was on the Chengdu Hunters, didn't really do a lot. Didn't really impress many people. But on the Guangzhou Charge, he was a very, very, very good hit scan player. Really good Sojourn. Obviously, Widow and Ashe play out of him as well. Cassidy, some of his best heroes. But I honestly was very impressed by his run on the Charge. He looked way better on the Charge than he did on the Hunters, which to me is a good sign that he is a player who is ascending. We're going to potentially see the best of him going into next year, and he has a whole year now with this team under his belt, half a season plus the off season. So you're going into a season, have a full off season to really kind of gel with the full team, including Choi Zaewon and Piggy, who were not players that Jimmy has experience with when he was with Chengdu. So I really like this duo. I think they look very, very good. They're pretty flexible, which is nice. The fact that Choi Zaewon is your Tracer, and then you have a hit scan player is pretty good. I don't think they have the most flexibility. I think that there are certainly areas where I would like to see some more flexibility. Like Jimmy on Tracer is not really something that I have much faith in. I haven't seen a lot of it. Maybe he's better at it than I think. So in the event of like a Tracer Genji meta, I don't know how well this team will be able to perform, but I think you could replace Tracer with some things that Jimmy is better at that you could maybe kind of make it work. But Tracer is kind of a hard lock, and as long as Choi Zaewon can play it, I think this team is in a really good spot in that regard. Final player on the roster is Piggy. Of course, played for the Houston Outlaws for a while, and then made a move over to the Guangzhou Charge. I do have some concerns with Piggy solo tanking. We saw it not work out super successfully for the Houston Outlaws in the 2022 season. And when he joined Guangzhou, the team looked good when he was able to play the heroes he was good on, or at least comfortable on, and the ones that he historically played. But it was really that switch by the Chengdu Hunters to the Winston in the play-in that really hurt Piggy. He just could not match on the Winston. It was not a hero he was particularly strong on. And so that kind of ended up being a big part of the mismatch that really elevated that Hunters roster into that game against the Spark. Now, Piggy's had an off-season to learn some of those heroes, and generally speaking, a lot of the players that we've seen in the Western region, who are historically not Winston players, we saw a lot of Winston out of them, and they did pretty well in the Pro-Am. You look at a player like Kaluj, who's not historically a Winston player, or Dante, who's not historically a Winston player. They looked pretty good on Winston, even beating teams that are historically good Winstons, or players that are so good Winstons, like Kaluj beating Smurf, or Dante beating Donghak, or Dante beating Fearless, right? So it wasn't always necessarily that specific hero pick. Not like Winston was the only pick, but there was a lot of Winston play, right? Piggy's good on Sigma, right? He's really, really good on Sigma. That's his best hero. He's a really good diva. He's a good Zarya. I don't think we saw a ton of Junker Queen out of him. I don't remember when Jotes ended. I think Krong played the majority of the Jotes for this team. if not all of it. I really don't remember when exactly, my understanding is Piggy joined pretty late into the season, like kind of right before right before stage 4, I think is when he joined. If memory serves me correctly. So I definitely want to see what he's able to do with more time with the rest of this roster. I definitely want to see what he's able to do kind of having spent a full offseason with these guys. And I think this is where I would like to see them add a 6th player personally, because as good as I think Piggy can be on the off-tank heroes, like I said, I don't think he's a great main tank player. I think in this region, you can probably get away with a little bit more than you could in the West, because I think when you look around the Eastern region, you have a lot of just off-tank players that are, career off-tank guys like Void, Piggy, obviously. You have 20 on the Spark, who will probably get a decent amount of playtime alongside Gushue. Fleta, who knows what Fleta is, really. You have Hanbin. So you have a lot of career off-tank guys, and I think that that's one of those things that you can kind of get away with it, because I would imagine we get quite a few off-tank heavy metas in this region. I've talked about this a bit. I've talked about this with the Infernal and whatnot. But I do think that Piggy is probably on the weaker side, especially when you compare him to the likes of Hanbin and Void. Those two are very, very good. They're some of the best that we've seen in the game. And so I think that a main tank would be good for this team to add. But I think depending on what we see, like I said, from the rest of the region, this support line is so good and these damage dealers did very, very well that maybe the thing you really need to do is just invest in getting Piggy to be your starting guy, get him to train and put in the hours on heroes like Winston and Reinhardt, and really kind of become a really solid player on those roles. Then you can kind of build upon that with the rest of your team, maybe bring in another damage dealer to kind of fill in that damage line. But generally speaking, I think that another tank player is probably the route they should go, because I think that's really where this team would be able to kind of excel, especially when the Chengdu Hunters have imploded and there's a very real possibility that Gaga's available, right? If Gaga's available, why would you not bring him in as kind of a Winston, Wrecking Ball, Reinhardt type of player who can really fill those roles? That lets Piggy play to his strengths, and I think in a region like this, that would help the roster out a bunch. Plus, Gaga has synergy already with Xerneas and with Jimmy and with Farway, so I think that's a really interesting potential for this roster. I don't know if that's the route they will go. It'll be interesting to see who they add as their 6th player, and it'll be interesting to just see them reveal their roster, because it's very possible this roster isn't their full roster for next season. Like I said, I think it is. I think this is the team that they are going to have next year. A lot of reason to believe that that's the case. The Overwatch League website shows this roster as their current roster. Now, to be fair, they also show the Chengdu Hunters roster with players that are no longer there, so it's hard to say for sure. But based on just kind of what we've seen from this team, what they have said, and specifically what they haven't said, I think there's a very real possibility that they're bringing back the majority of this roster from last year, which I think is a good move, because I think that last year's roster was very solid at the end of the year. I think a lot of the teams in the region are weaker than they were last year. I don't think Dallas is as good as they were last year. Shanghai certainly not as good as they were last year. I don't think the Dynasty are going to be as good as they were last year. And so if you're the Charge, you feel pretty good, because really, the Spark are the only team that look like they've gotten better. The Fuel are an interesting one because they're the defending champs. Yes, they've lost some pieces, but they still look very, very good. And a lot of the most important pieces to that team did return. The Infernal look like kind of a horizontal movement, maybe a little better, maybe a little worse, but at the end of the year, the Charge were arguably the better team than the Infernal, at least more consistent. So it's an interesting roster to look at. Who knows what the APAC region is going to be? This roster is wild. We don't even know if Chengdu has a roster right now. So Friday you might not even get a video on the Hunters on Friday. That's the fun part, isn't it? Isn't it great? Anyway, I digress. That's really all I have to say about the Guangzhou Charge. Hopefully we get information and confirmation about this roster soon. In the event that this roster is not at all their roster, I'll do a follow-up video to kind of talk about that, just to make sure that I talk about what their roster is. But I feel pretty good that they are bringing back most of their roster from last year, so that's really all there is to make of it, right? It's mostly the same roster from last year. They had a pretty good run at the end of the year. I'm excited to see them build upon it for 2023, and we'll see if they're able to find more success than they did last year. But that's it really for the Guangzhou Charge. Let me know your thoughts on this team in the comments down below. If you agree with me, disagree with me, whatever it may be, I would love to hear from you down below. But that's all for today. Thank you all once again. Hope you're all staying safe and staying healthy. And until next time, bye-bye.